Hello, I'm Ragdoll Trainer, and welcome to another Infinite Archive tank build. But don't worry, even though it's a tank, when fully buffed, it's still capable of putting out over 1.7 million DPS in some situations. On an average ad pull though, it consistently puts out around 600 to 900k DPS just by tanking the stuff and things. Here's how it works and what I use, with a couple of options you could change to fit you and your group's needs better. Let's start off with the front bar skills. Every Tonk needs a taunt. This build uses Frost Clench. This skill applies Major Maim, the Chilled status effect, and will also apply the Weakening glyph, which is how we deal with Marauders and bosses. Next up we have Elemental Susceptibility. This skill has no resource cost, applies Major Breach, and the Chilled, Burning, and Concussed status effects. So big focused efforts damage here. Blood of the Green Dragon is the primary heal for this build. This is a massive burst heal with a small extra heal over time, and it applies Major Endurance and Fortitude, as well as Minor Vitality. Choosing this heal allows us to use spell power potions without sacrificing our other recoveries. Next up is Spirit Guardian. The spirit heals every now and again, but more importantly, while active, 10% of the damage you take is transferred to the spirit instead. This is a very nice mitigation tool. Mass Hysteria fears enemies and applies AoE Major Cowardness, which is an essential debuff in the archives. It reduces the enemy's damage by a huge margin. The front bar ultimate can actually be anything you like. This is purely a bar buffer, so I've got Barrier slotted for the 10% extra Magicka recovery, thanks to the Magicka Aid passive. Moving on to the back bar, Chains of Dominance pulls the enemy to you, and applies the Burning status effect, as well as Major Cowardness. And it becomes a very large portion of this build's damage thanks to the sets of choice. More on that in a short bit though. Trample is a fantastic damage skill once everything's chained in and locked down, but I have it set up with Major Protection as well, so it's a great skill to cast before an ad pack is even pulled. And speaking of locking down those enemies, we've got Burning Talons. This is an immobilization tool, but it's also a fairly nice flame damage over time, and it provides a synergy to your ally as well. Up next is Blockade of Frost. This is mostly to proc our back bar weapon and spell damage glyph, but it also applies Minor Breach to chilled enemies, which they all will be. It has the added benefit of the Frost Safeguard as well. This just grants a small damage shield against projectiles. Mirage is next. This grants Major Evasion, which is super nice to have in IA. It does also grant Minor Resolve, so if you have the second Apocryphal Emissary vision, you could use the other morph, Phantasmal Escape, instead, if you prefer. Last but not least, we have Animate Blastbones, the Necro Res. If your ally dies, cast this. Really awesome to have. It can really save the day sometimes. Alright, let's quickly go over some of these key passives, but for the most part, just take any and all relevant passives. In the Shadow skill line, Refreshing Shadows gives 15% health, stamina, and magicka recovery. Shadow Barrier grants Major Resolve every time you cast a shadow ability, making this buff something you really don't have to think much about. Dark Vigor gives 5% max health per shadow skill slotted on each bar. We'll just be using 1 and 1, so 5% across the board. Dark Veil gives 2 extra seconds to our shadow skills. Why this is a passive and not just built into the skills tooltip, I have no idea, but moving on. Draconic Power has Burnished Scales, which increases the amount of damage you can block by 10%. World of Ruin increases dot and AoE damage by 7%. Elder Dragon grants you and your group minor brutality every time you cast a Draconic Power skill. It also increases health recovery by up to 700 based on your missing health. And the Storm Voice passive simply gives resources back whenever you cast an ultimate. But this build doesn't actually actively use ultimates. The only time you really should use an ultimate with this build is to resurrect your ally with the Necro Res. So you really won't benefit much at all from this passive. But if you do have the spare points, it definitely won't hurt anything. Okay. Living Death comes with Curative Curse, which gives extra healing when you have a negative effect on you. Near-Death Experience increases the critical chance of your heals, depending on how low the target health is. Corpse Consumption is actually unnecessary, because the only corpse-consuming ability on this build is the Necro Res. So again, if you've got the spare points, go for it, but you likely won't see any value out of this passive. And lastly, for Living Death, we have Undead Confederate, which increases our recoveries whenever our Spirit Mender is active. This build, by default, uses double Ice Staff and casts a ton of Magicka-based skills, so I don't recommend taking the Tri-Focus passive, but take all the rest. For armor, we're using 4 heavy, 2 medium, and 1 light. So take all armor passives, except for improved sneak. You don't really need that one. Make sure to grab your Undaunted passives here. And Magicka Aid passives if you're slotting Barrier. Make sure to grab your racial passives. You can of course be any race you like, but I'm using a Nord for the extra resistances. This build is set up to run slightly under resist cap, so if you're using another race, you'll want to make up those resistances some other way, either by wearing more heavy armor or changing jewelry traits or Mundus. Lots of options available to you, just bear that in mind. And finally, medicinal use, and Gourmand can also be nice to have. For champion points, in the Warfare tree, I've taken Bulwark, Enduring Resolve, Ironclad, and either Fighting Finesse or Thaumaturge if you don't have very many crit visions yet. In the Fitness tree, I've got Slippery, Expert Evasion, Bracing Anchor, and Strategic Reserve. Strategic Reserve gets very, very strong when paired with the Refined Restoration Vision, and synergizes very, very well with this setup. This build doesn't have a Purge built into it, so this extra recovery will help combat those incoming dots. Alright, looking at the stat sheet. Keep in mind, nearly all these stats will become quite inflated as you progress through the archives by picking up various visions as you go, so I won't waste much time here. You can balance your attribute points however you like, but I've put all mine into health, and I'm running this build at 32760 spell resist and 32034 physical resist. If you really wanted more than that, you can very easily swap a medium or light piece to heavy, or even run a protective jewelry trait, or a plethora of other options available to you. As far as Mundus goes, I use the Atronach Mundus until I have enough extra Magicka sustain via the Archival Intelligence Vision, and then I swap to the Thief Mundus for more critical chance. This contributes a lot to damage, but also survivability with more critical heals incoming as well. I use Bewitched Sugar Skulls for my food choice because it gives a good chunk on health recovery and also all 3 resources. And for potions, thanks to Green Dragon Blood, this build can use spell power potions without sacrificing the other recoveries, and we do need the Major Sorcery and Prophecy. If you really want to squeeze in a little bit of extra damage, you could do potion swapping if you have enough extended favors or quickened tinctures, and also use weapon power pots to give major savagery and brutality, which will pair better with the Elder Dragon passive. Alright, let's get into the gear. This is really where everything comes together. For my front bar weapon, I've got an infused ice staff of Torug's Pack with the Weakening Glyph, which is a crafted set that decreases weapon enchantment cooldown by 33% and increases their potency by 45%, meaning your weapon glyph is stronger and you can apply it more often, which is fantastic for dealing with marauders and bosses, as it sort of provides a little buffer time to get that weakening on target. And then I'm also wearing that as a heavy reinforced chest, a light well-fitted waist, medium divine legs, and heavy divine feet. And for a back bar weapon, an infused ice staff of the Unleashed Terror set with a weapon damage glyph. This set comes from the Castle Thorn dungeon. When you deal direct damage with a blink, charge, leap, teleport, or pull ability, you deal bleed damage over 10 seconds and apply the hemorrhaging status effect every tick. So this pairs very well with Chains of Dominance, which already applied burning, but will now apply hemorrhaging thanks to this set. And this duration can get boosted by the Lasting Harm vision. I'm also wearing this on the hands. It's a medium set. Divine's trait. And I've got this on the neck and one of the rings as well. As far as jewelry traits and enchantments go, I'll balance between infused magicka recovery and bloodthirsty with a weapon and spell damage glyph, just depending on how many magicka sustained visions I've already picked up. So I usually have a couple of extra jewelry pieces on hand, so I can freely swap between them. For the monster set, I've had great results with both Damahos and Thurvakin. Damahos creates a 10-meter ring around you when you deal damage. It lasts for 10 seconds and occurs once every 15 seconds. It deals some flame and physical damage every second. And if you're standing within the ring, you get an extra 300 weapon and spell damage. Thurvakin procs off of damage taken and starts a growing AoE of disease damage, which ticks every second for 8 seconds, and applies the disease status effect, and this can occur once every 16 seconds. So both are great options, both contribute a really solid chunk of DPS, just really whichever you prefer. I'm wearing those as a heavy reinforced helmet, and the shoulder piece I'm using heavy divines. And for the glyphs on the body pieces, you can balance it however you like. I've got mostly health with a couple random stamina glyphs. And finally, we've got the Shattered Paths Signet Mythic on as well. This increases your damage done with status effects by 1% for every one ultimate you have, up to 170%. And when you have 170 or more ultimate, your light and heavy attacks apply a random status effect up to once every 4 seconds. The negative is that it consumes one ultimate every 1.5 seconds while in combat. This pairs very, very well with this Chains Unleashed setup, as well as all the health recovery stacking paired with strategic reserves, we want to sit comfy at 500 ultimate with this build. This also means that we can fully invest in the adaptive conqueror vision, but just a small note about that vision, it does seem to be bugged at the moment. It states that it's supposed to increase the cost of your ultimate, but it seems to not be doing that at the moment. So just keep that in mind. You do want to be able to cast your Necro Res in emergency situations, so if that does get fixed, you won't want to take so many of the adaptive conquerors that your ult is too expensive to cast. So just keep that in mind. You could always grab some boundless potentials to make the ultimate cheaper too, but just a small disclaimer there. As far as trait and enchantments go, again, I've got Bloodthirsty with weapon and spell damage glyph or infused magicka recovery. It's just about balancing sustain. If your mag recovery is feeling great enough, then sink into damage as much as possible. I suppose as a general rule of thumb with this setup, if you have enough magicka sustain to chain everything in before a heavy attack is needed, then go for damage. My comfort spot has been 1 infused mag recovery and 2 bloodthirsty with damage. And last, but certainly not least, let's talk about vision choices to maximize the build. Of course, you can't really guarantee what order you get your visions in, but rerolls are a thing. It just gets costly. Anyways, here's what to look out for. Focused efforts, attuned enchantments, and extended favor are key. Prioritize these as much as possible. The transformation pieces are also very important. If you want to take all 3 of the werewolf transformation pieces, you can, but I wouldn't recommend taking the actual transformation if it pops up, unless your ally is prepared to debuff the enemies for you. For help with sustain, you'll want to grab up Archival Intelligence and Endurance. Both are key because of the amount of magicka skills cast, and the lack of any ability or tool to regain stamina other than recovery. Adaptive Athlete, Effortless Aegis, and Stamina Reserves can also aid in sustain. For help with defense, you'll want to grab Adaptive Defender, Refined Restoration, Hardy Vitality, and Armored Shells, because this build doesn't have a purge built into it. This will tremendously aid in combating against dots. Mystic Ward, Apocryphal Emissary, Bolstered Mending, and Restorative Protection can also be a big help. For help with offense, you'll want to grab Adaptive Conqueror, Brawling Advantage, and Lethal Sorcery. Once you have at least most of your crit chance, Brawling Blitz and Thaumic Boom will add a lot of damage, along with Thumping Thaumaturgy and Persistent Pain. Lasting Harm pairs very, very nicely with this setup, and Prickly Retort and Storm Projection can add quite a bit of free damage. These are certainly not all the options, just hopefully a good place to help get you started. Alright, I think that pretty much covers everything. If you found this video helpful, please like the video and share it with your friends. Consider hitting the subscribe button as well. I'm very excited for Update 50 right around the corner, and I plan to release more content then. I'm Ragdoll Trainer. Happy archiving, folks. I'm gonna do the potions. It's a pretty good one. Oh, no way, bro. No